Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's Techstrong Roundtable. My name is Cody J. Brown, and I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting program ahead. First, I need to cover just a couple of housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, maybe you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, and we really hope that you do, we want you to send those in to us using the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen. Over on the right side, you'll see a few other options, first of which is the chat tab. And we'd like you to start warming that up for us right now by letting us know either from where you're tuning in or what role you play in your org. If you navigate to the handouts panel, you'll see there are a couple additional resources uploaded there for you, so feel free to grab those. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So on to the topic of our discussion today. It is digital transformation. And I'm joined by Sid Chaudhry, VP of Product at Harness, Robert Brennan, Vice President of Product Development at Fairwinds, and Britt Crawford, Director of Product Management at Strong DM. Now, welcoming back a familiar face to Techstrong Learning is our very own Sharon Florentine, Managing Editor here at Techstrong Group. So Sid, Robert, Britt, and Sharon, thank you all so much for being here with me today. Sharon, do you want to go ahead and take over?
Sure thing, Cody. Thank you so much. Great to be back here today with all of you, and welcome to our audience. I see a bunch of you already chiming in. Welcome, welcome. So digital transformation. This is a huge priority for software development in the industry. And, you know, it's something that both consumers and internal employees now expect. They want applications are supposed to be fast, delivery has to be digital. And at the core of all of that, DevOps best practices. So the challenge, it seems, is implementing those best practices at scale so that things can continue to expand and drive the digital economy. So the first question I'm going to throw out here is DevOps a prerequisite for digital transformation? So who's going to be my first victim?
I can take that.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. DevOps is a prerequisite for digital transformation, because if we look at what is digital transformation, it's about companies saying that they will reach and serve their customers using software-defined experiences. And how do we deliver those software-defined experiences to those customers? It's DevOps at the core of it. So whether it be a Netflix transforming itself from a DVD player to a world's leading streaming platform, whether it be Goldman Sachs, a Wall Street bank partnering with Apple to launch Apple Card and get you approvals in seconds as opposed to hours and days. All these at the core of it have been DevOps delivered. And it's exciting time, right? Because the curve of these challenges will just continue to grow from here on. And great to see so many enterprises excited about what are the best practices, advances. How do they make more of those best practices come alive in their developers and self-service ecosystems that they are fostering? So we at Harness are excited to be playing a small part in this journey.
Anybody else want to agree, disagree, expand?
Oh, totally agree. I think DevOps is pretty much a prerequisite for anything you're doing in software these days. I mean, you could do it without, but it's going to be painful.
Yeah. So, I mean, the next question kind of, I feel like it's a chicken egg thing, right? Though, because if DevOps is a prerequisite for digital transformation, what impact has digital transformation then had on DevOps? Like, how did the two feed into each other?
That's an interesting one. I think one of the things it's done is it really expanded the scope of DevOps. Before, you're talking about how do I automate my application delivery, my infrastructure management, everything within your own sphere. But as you're pursuing digital transformation projects, you're often integrating with other SaaS apps or assets that are outside of your control. And so DevOps' scope has expanded from your cloud account to your cloud account, all the SaaS platforms that you're dealing with.
Okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
I would say it's really just accelerated the DevOps transformation as well. That business level requirement of we need to enact this digital transformation has from a tactical level kind of forced teams to adopt DevOps and accelerate that DevOps transformation as they kind of teach other teams work together, how they deploy, et cetera.
Yeah. So, at Harness, we say that DevOps has become more left shifted in the last few years, right? Originally, DevOps was a lot of, using chef and puppet scripts to make your infrastructure come alive. Today, software delivery platforms like Harness have completely changed that, and they don't stop at that, just laying down the infrastructure foundation. They make every concern that a developer has to go through in order to make that software defined experience come alive. They make that happen on your behalf. For example, I'll take a concrete example, right? Let's say I'm a DevOps team. I need to ensure that my software is delivered in a reliable manner. I can start using something we call as canary deployments, like a canary in the coal mine. And then I watch the performance of that canary using machine learning. And if things go wrong, I auto roll back. Few years back, this should be in the right. It would create a production incident. It would lead to some postmortem. It would lead to some, I would say, incremental change in release practices. Those days are gone. I don't think anybody has the ability to wait that long anymore. A couple of other examples that we see very actively are, for example, bringing in security vulnerability testing into DevOps toolchain, bringing in chaos engineering resilience testing into DevOps toolchain. All these used to happen a lot late, and DevOps was happy in its smaller scope. Today, all these are integral part of the DevOps process.
So you mentioned nobody has the time to wait anymore. So what does that do? How much deadline pressure are DevOps teams under, given that nobody can wait anymore? I mean, that's got to be just incredible.
Yeah, I think the first imperative of operations teams is to make sure the infrastructure stays up and running. So a lot of times you see deadlines kind of getting pushed aside and pushed back just because there's so many fires that need to be put out today. And I think that's that kind of causes a lot of delays and causes a lot of missed deadlines and things like that. I know there's generally these business level imperatives of like, okay, this year we want to finally get onto Kubernetes, or we finally want to make whatever transformation, have CI/CD pipelines for every one of our projects, things like that. And I see those deadlines just getting pushed out year after year after year, just because so many things come up in the meantime. And often the scope of those projects, it seems like a really easy thing. Just put it in a container and ship it, whatever else. And then you actually get into the nuts and bolts of it, and you realize we actually have to re-architect our whole app. We need to pull in development. We need to pull in the product team, the platform team. There's so many different personas that need to collaborate on these types of transformations that it ends up being, much more difficult to ship on a deadline than folks think at the beginning.
Yeah, I'll tell you a good example of this extreme pressure that we see is the security vulnerability testing example, right? Previously, a security and compliance team will take most likely scan release artifacts and live applications using vulnerability scanners, and they will create a report and they will ask the dev team to fix, and dev team will take their own time to fix. Those days are, again, not acceptable today. Today, the mandate of DevSecOps, software supply chain security that is increasingly coming to bear, especially in the regulated industries, is forcing teams to identify how they can bring testing into for example, the CI/CD pipeline, look at the CV and CVSS scores, and make it consumable by the developer, and understand what sort of remediation can the developer do. And if let's say there is no remediation, you need to ask for an exemption. and that exemption will be reviewed by the security and compliance teams, and your release will be blocked till then. Now imagine you are the developer whose code has led to a new critical vulnerability, and you are writing that exemption, and you have essentially blocked the entire team's software from reaching production. I don't want to be that developer. It's a very difficult state to be in, right? And that's the pressure. So we want digital transformation, but if we can't help the DevOps team tackle these pressure through very intelligent and I would say real-time tooling, we are not going to get there.
Yeah, especially in security, that's something we see a lot, because a lot of the security burden is shifting left onto developers. And as Sid said, most of that scanning, which used to happen after deployment, and then you would have a period of exposure and remediation. Now that's all happening as part of the CI/CD pipeline. Not only that, most modern security companies are adopting a sort of DevOps-focused deployment model, where you can easily program both your security scanning, or in StrongDM's case, your access to infrastructure through your DevOps tool chain. And we're seeing that with actually a lot of other SaaS apps as well, where they have a Terraform provider. So right as part of your deployment process, you're also configuring what security scans is it going through, how am I going to provide access, all of your other security burden.
Right. Is that part of the reason that so many of these big digital transformation projects fail? Is that a major contributing factor? Are there others? What plays into those unfortunate failures?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I do think often, as Robert pointed out earlier, you're bringing in product infrastructure security. I think often the complexity of these projects is underestimated. You plan it like a traditional 0 to 1 software development process, but you haven't accounted for, how am I going to build the environment to run it in? What am I going to encounter when I integrate with this other tool?
Yeah,
I think the organizations that I see succeed will, they understand ahead of time how big of a problem this is, and they will scope a smaller version of their transformation with, say, a greenfield application or a relatively new temporary application that's already been containerized, say, and they'll kind of set up their their ideal environment for that one application, and then they'll slowly migrate older applications over and maybe deal with some hybrid infrastructure for a long time. Maybe some old legacy applications just always exist in a data center, or the old way of doing things. They'll just end up deprecating that eventually and get into the new world just by naturally kind of letting the old things die off. I think that's the best way to go, is to kind of start with a greenfield project or a relatively new one, and just keep the scope as small as possible for that first step in your journey.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think there are two primary reasons for failure. One is the lack of organizational buy-in to change culture, processes. And it's not just about the tool. You can bring in any tool you want, but if your organization is gonna not move in a collaborative fashion with all these multiple stakeholders coming together, it's just not gonna happen. So you need some exec air cover to help you drive some of these transformation in a bite-sized manner, let's say. Second is this integration challenge is very real. I think the tool sprawl, like just to deploy, let's say onboard a software developer, or onboard a new microservice, or deploy that microservice, first build it and then deploy it through pre-prod and prod, and then use things like feature flag to control behavior, or the canary one, which is even before that, do security testing, do cloud cost management, chaos engineering. Next thing you know, you're spending like really the majority of the time that you had allocated to essentially onboard new application teams, right? Which is usually the DevOps tools are owned by the platform engineering team, and they have to onboard application team. All the time is gone by the platform engineering team just integrating this tool sprawl, and next thing something or other breaks because they're coming in from different vendors. So what we do is the first one, the whole organizational buy-in, we coach our users and customers around maturity frameworks, and give them a point of view into where they are today, and sort of a path of, like, multi-staged maturity framework to get to where they want to go to, as opposed to that one shot 0 to 1, which is very hard. I mean, it's just does not happen in reality. And second is an integrated, modern software delivery platform that brings a bunch of these concerns. We say to our users that, you can leave all those challenges onto us. We will deal this on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Someone in the audience had a question about rugged DevOps as part of security. I'm not familiar with the rugged DevOps term. Can we dig into that a little bit? What does that mean, and how does it apply to security in this instance?
I'm not familiar with the rugged DevOps term either, but DevOps is a key security practice. Key to security practice. I mean, you do want to move a lot of the burden of security from post-production to pre-production, right? In the past, you're doing some static analysis and then pen testing and remediation, but really you want to be using tools to do CV scanning and static compile time checking, and then also deploying your security configuration. So your network access rules and whatever other protections that you're putting in place as part of your DevOps setup, and testing that both in pre-production and then production. So you are greatly increasing your security by integrating it into your DevOps flow.
Or DevSecOps.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if I were to take the literal meaning, right, rugged means you can take your processes, practices, tooling into any kind of terrain, and it will come through. It will deliver results. Mm-hmm. So one way to think about it is sort of clearly think that there are two parts of the problem. One is known vulnerability management, which is happening, which is like people understand that there are vulnerabilities in your application code, in the open source components, in the container images, that base images and the images you bake, and then live applications. All these are known, and each one of them has a scanner. You obviously should be scanning them. You should be, deduping, prioritizing, so that, like ideally developers and DevOps teams can fix those. So that's like, one part of the problem. Like I would say it's table stakes, right? The second part of is, what is your insurance policy? What if a scanner does not catch, because it is not a vulnerability. When Log4j came along last year, it was not a vulnerability originally. Every scanner was passing. So you need to prepare as an insurance policy with for the 0-day vulnerabilities and open source license compliance risks that come up at any point of time. And one such approach which is gaining a lot of momentum, is around software bill of materials and generating them against the artifacts and correlating them and storing them and allowing searching across environments, and making sure that you have whenever that next Log4j shows up, you're prepared. You can identify which environments you need to tackle. How do you remediate? Many times you will have to remediate with some prior version in the first 72 hours because the upstream has not been fixed. Then you come back and fix it. So that is an integral part of like software supply chain security. Even the SALSA framework from Google talks about it. So if you want it to be rugged, you have to tackle both sides of the equation and not just assume that you are secure by just doing, let's say, the first part or even the second part. You have to do both.
Yeah, Sid brings up a good point there. I think there's kind of a trade-off between, if you scan as part of the CI/CD process, before people merge their PR, say, you're really close to the developer gets that feedback really quickly. There's never a point where you're vulnerable in production, right? You're catching those changes before they merge into the infrastructure as code and ship into your prod environment. But it's pretty far from your source of truth, right? You need to also be scanning your production environment because that's the source of truth. That's what's actually running. And, as Sid brought up, maybe, somebody ran a container scan, in their PR as they were shipping log4j into their production environment. Everything's clear. It goes into prod, and then log4j gets announced. You need that scan to be ongoing in production to make sure that once it gets announced, you get an alert saying, hey, you have a container running in production that has this vulnerability. So making sure that you're in both terrains is super important.
Yeah, good point. All right. So when we are talking about digital transformation, and that involves bringing in new apps and new ways of getting these things done, are most of the new applications now cloud native? And if so, what kind of challenges does that introduce into the digital transformation landscape? That's like 6 questions in one. I'm sorry.
I can try tackling that. So obviously, if new code is being written, then we're fair to say that it'll be probably containerized or use a serverless function and deployed in Kubernetes or deployed onto a cloud platform directly, right? But what we realize, like as you said, digital transformation requires companies to build very strong, nice, clean abstraction layers on top of their existing systems and their core, I would say, forte. Like if you were to trying to, let's say, digital transformation for an American Express, there is a lot of legacy tooling and technologies that they have to integrate this higher level application that interacts with the end user. So and many times as part of launching new let's say business initiatives and so on, you will also be changing that legacy application. It has to be deployed in probably an on-prem data center onto a rack or a VM, and you have to coordinate the cloud native apps delivery with the application delivery of the traditional application, and this coordination puts tremendous burden because previously that team was dealing with let's say only the older technology. Now they have to learn all this new technology, become masters at it, and it's not like the older technology goes away. They have to actually run 2 technologies and 2 delivery pipelines at the same time. We see that so often at many of the larger customers that we strive to actually build these common abstractions, like can it be a common service? Can it be a common deployment pipeline? Only the last mile sort of changes. Instead of you deploying into Kubernetes, you can deploy into let's say a VM, right? So I feel that these abstractions are necessary for the DevOps teams to move faster. Otherwise, I mean, the burden of weight of tech that has been built over multiple decades will just bring them down.
That's an interesting point, I think, about technical debt, right? And how you get out from under that to drive these initiatives forward. Yeah, just my little tangent. And so are these applications also, are we moving towards event-driven apps as well? Sid, you're nodding. Britt, you're also nodding.
Yeah, maybe Britt, you can go. I have some ideas as well.
I think you are driving towards more, more apps that are driven by interactions for other ones. Automated security response is a big area of expansion in the security industry, and that is specifically event driven. I am generating a signal of events. All of a sudden, a system decides that it's time to pay attention to one of these. It's a security relevant event, and it has to go reach into yet another system to actually respond. So you would generate a security relevant event and maybe terminate a network connection by connecting to your Palo Alto firewall, or telling StrongDM, I want to revoke that user's access because I've seen now my XDR system has said, oh, this device has been compromised. This end user device has been compromised. I need to go revoke access in my central directory. So we see a lot more of those interactions.
Okay.
I think the shift to Kubernetes has also really helped to drive this, kind of this idea of an event-driven architecture, whether that's for security or scaling, alerting and monitoring. Like I think it's really helped enable that kind of transformation.
Yeah, we see that for example, analytics applications that are being driven by users' existing behavior, sort of feeding in the base data and then machine learning, sort of identifying what sort of recommendations, what sort of changes, what sort of next user behavior that you want to drive is a critical part of the so-called digitally transformed application, because it just increases the viral loop of the user action, right? You just keep on doing more and more. The YouTubes and the Netflix of the world have shown us that there is merit to that thinking. Imagine enterprise applications now being built with that point of view, and there, like if you see that kind of an application, you need technologies to come together and imagine the life of the platform engineering team or the application team. You'll need to read the fire, sort of take the fire hose of all these user generated events, store it in some, pipe it through some sort of a Kafka or a messaging system, store it in some first partly in transactional, partly in OLAP style databases, then run some machine learning algorithm on the raw data, identify some models that like a data scientist will look through, and then they have to quickly deploy that and track what results of their experiment were, and then sort of finalize that model in order for if it actually drives more user engagement. And so the number of technology, like it's all one application at the end of the day. The number of technologies and number of teams that need to come together to create this kind of an experience is non-trivial.
Yeah. I think one thing that we keep coming back to is the teams, which teams are made up of people, right? So how does this digital transformation impact people, skills, what they need to know to build these apps and push these transformations forward for the companies they work for? Like, people are kind of always at the center of this, even though we talk a lot more about the tools and the processes sometimes. But
yeah, I think Sid brought up before the importance of getting organizational buy-in. If you're going to go through a digital transformation like this, it is, to a large degree, you're kind of paying down tech debt, right? You're doing things that are not necessarily going to directly benefit customers, right? It's not new features, things like that. So if your product team isn't bought in on like, we need to do this in order to, meet the digital landscape where it's going to be in order for our product to succeed in the long term. If the product team, isn't bought into that vision, they're going to be complaining like, why aren't we shipping new features? Why are we doing all this stuff that's like not adding value to our users? So you need to do a really good job of selling that across the organization. And then you also brought up another good point, Sharon, which is that a lot of this involves adopting new technologies. Maybe it's Kubernetes, maybe it's new security tooling. It means educating your security team on new technologies. It means educating your product team, your development teams, your operations teams. And so again, you need that organizational buy-in to get those folks to really accept, okay, I'm doing away with the old tooling that maybe I loved and I'm used to, and I'm going to need to figure out how to use this new stuff, maybe take classes, figure out how to onboard onto this new platform.
Yeah, sort of upskilling. I was just pointing out that there is a good balance between learning technology and drowning in the cognitive overload that comes with technology, right? And that's very real, I would say, today. And what one way can be to divide and conquer, where let's say the platform engineering team who are closer to some of the infrastructure, cloud and technologies, they create this, I would say, what we call as golden paths to production for the application development teams to adopt. and it has got everything baked in, the right way of structuring your GitHub repo, the right way to do scanning, the right way to do builds, and the right pull request checks, and then deployments, and then finally how to monitor in a consistent manner. So that can be built by the platform engineering team. But if I'm a developer, what gives me I would say joy, right? What gives me happiness is to code the need of digital transformation, right, into application logic using let's say my programming language of choice. And which means that I need to be abstracted out of some of like what exactly goes into the golden paths. As long as you give me a golden path, I focus on what my forte is. Yes, I will need to learn maybe how to better develop complex microservices that interact with each other in like asynchronous manner and so on. But that's good. I like that. But don't teach me like everything that needs to be learned in this infrastructure work. Like for example, if you want to learn AWS today, it has probably 250 services. You're not going to get done in this lifetime. So not a great strategy to figure out to just learn everything at the same time. So we are big believers in this abstractions, balancing the cognitive overload versus learning.
So to what extent are organizations building apps from scratch versus just extending existing SaaS apps, do you think?
Yeah, I think it depends heavily on the organization. I've seen some organizations that, just have a monolithic application and they want to lift and shift that over to Kubernetes or whatever it is. That sometimes goes okay. It sometimes fails terribly. I think it's a lot easier if you can kind of start, by picking off smaller pieces, build things new, even if it's only going to serve, 5% of the functionality of your application. If you can offload that to a microservice that can be put into Kubernetes, as I was saying before, kind of starting with that greenfield application makes it a lot easier to initiate that digital transformation rather than trying to do everything all at once.
And so do you think that we're seeing more, well, Sid mentioned abstraction a couple of times, and that brought to mind low code, no code apps that, tend to provide that layer of abstraction, especially if companies are trying to get citizen developers involved, people who don't write code. Is digital transformation forcing more of those apps into organizations? And yeah, Rob's nodding.
To some extent, but I think also, the primary case for digital transformation is often the one that Sid cited earlier, where you have a legacy app that you can't necessarily lift and shift and dispose of. And so that's really not going to lend itself well to a low code environment. I think for some things like, increasingly deriving more of your activity out of a SaaS app like Salesforce or something like that, like, yes, you can definitely use that kind of solution. And we're seeing more and more of that.
Great question here from the audience. What role does platform engineering play in the future of digital transformation?
Yeah. We see them as the builders of the road, and the application development teams are the fast moving cars, or the jet planes that go from one destination to another, right? So they go, like, if the platform engineering does a phenomenal job, they become the power. They provide the power of self-service to individual application development teams, and as a result, everything moves fast. And the digital transformation is primarily about moving fast with obviously the right guardrails. If the platform engineering team is let's say not empowered to make those changes happen, then you will see like 10 app teams struggle with the same problems, come up with different ways of solving the same problems, and next thing you know, that it will sometimes impact user experiences, because the consistency around some of these things will just not be there. So platform engineering team is the team to make, I would say, they are like the unsung warriors in a way to make digital transformation come alive, because they are providing the real horsepower for the dev teams to move forward.
Yeah, I would say if you only have one application team, if you're a fairly small company, you probably don't need a platform team. You can let that one application team kind of figure out how they want to deploy and all that. But the point you have like 2, 3, maybe 10 different application teams all trying to deploy into your infrastructure, you really do need that single team to set up those best practices, those the kind of the golden path to get into production, and that's where the platform team really starts to shine. As Sid pointed out, it helps those app teams go a lot faster because they don't have to each reinvent the wheel, each solve different problems in different ways. The other big benefit, though, is that it gives you kind of a consistency throughout the organization. So you're doing your security scanning in a consistent way that you can, report to your compliance auditing teams and things like that very easily. It allows you to enforce best practices in the same way, enforce policies, labeling schemes, manage costs. So it creates consistency throughout the organization. So when you do spin up a new application, they have a set of best practices to adhere to. They have a set of policies that they're going to adhere to. They can kind of just plug into your platform and go rather than having to, reinvent the wheel.
Totally makes sense. Let's see. We keep coming back to best practices. What are some of your favorite digital transformation best practices or best advice that you would offer someone who's, embarking on this journey or stuck in the middle somewhere?
Yeah, it's one thing I would say. So at Fairwinds, we specifically work with a lot of companies who are starting to use Kubernetes or have established their Kubernetes footprint and are trying to get a little bit more mature about it. And one of the things we see over and over again is that the folks who put policy and guardrails in place very early on in the process are much more successful at it. The folks who kind of tack it on after they've made their digital transformation struggle a lot more because they start to adopt some policies and they realize, we've already got 1,000 violations in our environment. We have to go back and change all this code and change all these containerized apps and whatever else. Whereas the folks who adopt it on day one, they can see very, very clearly early on, okay, these are the best practices we need to adopt. These are the things we need to start enforcing as teams do this transformation at the beginning. So I would say, very early on, figuring out what are the security policies you want to adopt, what are the best practices policies you want to adopt. Things like, setting resource limits for CPU and memory, things like making sure people have auto scaling in place. There are just so many different things, labeling schemes, things like that you really want to have in place on day one so that, folks are building those muscles early on in the process instead of, doing this digital transformation and then 3 months down the line, having the platform team come back and say, actually, you're not done yet. You have to go back and change all these things.
I would say this is one that Robert's talked about a bit, but it's the best one. So I'm gonna say it again, which is start with the new, build the perfect environment for the new greenfield application, and then start shifting things over. If you start with the lift and shift, you've taken on a much bigger burden. And so start with that, get a success, and then start making the plan of how do you get that old application into the newer framework.
Yeah, I would add that, build on top of that to say that, think in terms of that golden paths to prod, but it did not be the most advanced golden path to prod on day one, right? Yeah. Pick the path that is maybe most automation friendly, because that's what traditionally DevOps has always been, right? How do you take source code commits and create builds, and then builds go to go through some sort of functional testing, and then after they have been blessed, they go to some pre-prod environments where you do some additional probably stress or performance testing, and then finally you'll release to prod. Pick the simplest path and let that path be used by multiple teams. as opposed to them trying to come up with their own path, which they will not, I mean, they may, it may give a false sense of agility to them, but you will probably have done a better job as a platform engineering organization because you know your company's infrastructure better than anybody else. And then as they are, so we call it in Harness, it's called a template, and that template that gets used by n of these teams. The good part is that this template can change. You can slowly add other critical pieces into this puzzle, whether it be, you know, automatic security scanning, automatic error tracking, uh, you know, ability to do chaos tests, automatic SLO management. Like there is a lot of automatic pieces you can add in. You add to the template, and voila, magically it shows up in the pipelines of those teams as an additional version, obviously, that they need to adopt. And so it's the software way of introducing organizational change, right? You would communicate organizational change using presentations and slides, but now you're actually using software to make it happen.
Another great question from the audience here. What role does a digital transformation subject matter expert play? What kind of skills do they need to have?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think even above and beyond skills, if you're looking to hire somebody here, I would look for battle scars more than skills. I would look for somebody who's seen this happen several times, because it goes wrong every time. There's always things that happen that you don't expect. At Fairwinds, we've transformed dozens of organizations from pre-Kubernetes to Kubernetes, and the reason we do it so well is that we've seen it go wrong so many different ways, so many different times. I would say every new company brings a new problem with it, and it's only having seen things go wrong that you kind of learn those instincts around what might be happening, how do we get around it, things like that. But aside from that, it's really a matter of what different organizations want out of their digital transformation, right? Do they want to get on Kubernetes? Are they just trying to get to the cloud? Are they just trying to get to containers? But really, I guess it's really every kind of cloud native technology is something that you should be well versed in. Different cloud providers, I think Kubernetes is a huge one. Containers are a huge one. And probably having some skills on like the old way of doing things, how do data centers operate, how do monolithic apps operate, because you need to understand the kind of the state of things now, and you need to understand the desired state in order to build a bridge there. But every organization's transformation is going to look so different.
Yeah, I see it in terms of like a customer value chain. Let's say we have an end customer whose experience we want to transform. For example, they're renting DVDs from us, and tomorrow we want to provide them a plethora of choices using live streaming. So that is like at the top level, maybe that's a product manager's job to define what that experience will look like, what are the organizational process changes necessary, and then it will come down to various application teams to start modernizing and changing how they were doing things, right? And they will then become the customers to a common platform engineering team. So if you want digital transformation, then you need that customer first, I would say, approach at every layer of the organization, and ask as to what am I good at and how am I gonna get better at using that customer's need to make it happen. And then this totality of this, like it's a value chain inside the company, right? They all come together to change the customer's experience. But like I said, the platform engineering changing the developer or DevOps team's experience will help them change, let's say, the end customer's experience. So it's like you keep changing that internal customer's experience as well, you will see a tremendous benefit to the external customer.
Awesome. All right, folks, we got a little bit more than 15 minutes till the top of the hour. So if you still have questions here, go ahead and pop those in the chat. We will answer them. To the three of you, any other thoughts that you want to lay out here? Final thoughts? No?
I'll just conclude by saying it's digital transformation super hard. So find all the help you can, whether that's internal help or external managed service providers, software providers, things like that. It's not something you can do alone.
Yeah.
That's actually, I'll ask one coming off of that comment. How do you vet a partner or a, I don't want to say tutor, but what do you look for if you're trying to find that help?
Yeah, I think to go back to my earlier statement of battle scars is probably the biggest one. It's invaluable to have that real experience. It doesn't really matter how many courses you've taken on Kubernetes and Amazon certifications and things like that. Having done it a few times, it's just the best way to learn is by doing.
And also verticalize, right? Like I'm sure digital transformation for, let's say, the government or the regulated industries is probably different than the digital transformation for a retailer, or a fintech, for example. So pick partners who are experts, who have gone through some of other people inside your own space, who can empathize with your challenges, because what you are living and breathing, there is a lot of commonality, no doubts about it, but there are some unique experiences that if somebody has gone through that before, they are probably a better partner.
Yeah,
makes sense.
That's a great point. I would say if you're a healthcare company, find other healthcare companies to talk to. Find some healthcare CTOs. Figure out what works and doesn't work within your vertical, what you can do to stay compliant, things like that.
All right. Someone in the Q&A is asking about Google Kubernetes, or would you recommend another platform? I would assume that's different for every organization, right?
Yeah. It depends on where you're running.
Yeah. If you're picking a cloud provider from scratch and you want to go Kubernetes, I think GKE is the most mature offering, but EKS is really caught up in the last couple of years, and there's less and less differentiation between Kubernetes providers over time.
Yeah, and it's not like on day one itself you will use the 10th level deep features of anything, right? So it's sometimes we actually evangelize our customers to think in a little bit higher level abstractions and not get attached to a cloud provider specific tech so early on without understanding the nuances. For example, you can probably do a lot with just kubectl as opposed to getting on with EKS CTL, for example. Like each one of them has a nuance. So sometimes there is not much of a choice. Obviously the provider wants you to use their proprietary ones because that ensures a faster lock-in, and some amount of lock-in is probably inevitable, and that's baked into your thinking. But make that lock-in conscious. Understand what you are getting into, and much of the tooling today starts out with open source, community driven bent of mind, which allows everybody to learn the basics really fast. But at scale, you will need absolutely tried and tested providers to help you through your journey.
Another member of the audience asks if you think a software engineer who's built their talent on new tech, DevOps-centric skills will be easily employable based on the level of digital transformation adoption.
Yes, easily. New tech and cloud-based applications is the growing edge of software development.
Yeah, there are not enough people who understand all the tech today, right? So, I would say both the let's say the cloud providers, 3 or 4 of them, and the application development technologies, they are, and let's say if I take databases and data warehouses, all these are moving so fast that you picking your own lane and becoming an expert on it is immediate currency.
Yeah. As someone who hires a lot of software engineers, I would say anytime somebody has some of those skills around Kubernetes, Datadog, Terraform, those kind of DevOpsy side of things, I'm primarily hiring for the software development, but that makes my ears perk up. Like you can handle our deployment pipeline, you understand CI/CD, things like that. Like that's just a huge bonus when I'm talking to somebody.
Yeah, I see that they're saying they're finding it hard to get roles, even though I'm self-trained. Yeah, and I that challenge is understood, right? So I think it is also important to take on some industry accepted certifications like Kubernetes certified admin or certified developer. Similarly, Terraform has its own associate and Vault and so on. So pick the right structure so that you can show, I would say, external validation of your skill set, even if, let's say, you haven't had immediate employment in that area, right? So that it gives the hiring team confidence that yes, this person has been baked in the sun.
All right. Last couple minutes here. If you've got your questions, now's the time. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it back over to Cody, and we will start wrapping up.
Well, I'll go ahead and give away those 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, and then we can rejoin for a closeout.
Sounds great.
So for everyone who's joined us so far, thank you so much for being here. Our 4 winners are Eduardo M, Kimchandra P, Manohar K, and Satolu V. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim those gift cards, but if you don't happen to see that email, please do check your spam folder. And I'll also remind everyone that this session was and is being recorded. So should you want to rewatch it, you will be receiving an email with a link to access this recording on demand. All right. Sharon, any other questions?
No, sir. I'm going to hand it over to you for our wrap up.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone's time here. To our audience, thank you so much for being here. Britt, Robert, Sid, thank you for joining us today. And Sharon, thank you for filling Mike's shoes and leading our conversation today.
Sure. My pleasure.
Thank you, Sharon and Cody.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Al.
Super fun discussion, guys. Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
Awesome. So to our audience, thank you for being here once more. We do just want to ask for a few more minutes of your time. Well, maybe a second of your time. As soon as we close out, there will be a survey that pops up on your screen. We'd really like to hear your feedback about today's program. Let us know what you liked or maybe what you'd like to see on future programs. But otherwise, we do hope to see everyone at an upcoming Techstrong Learning program. Have a great rest of your day. And to our panel, thank you once more.
Thanks.